Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Mohamed with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. The United States sets a grim double record, registering more than 3,700 deaths of COVID-19 and over 250,000 new cases overnight, while Brazil has surpassed 7 million infections with 70,000 more cases and 1,000 new deaths in a day. In Pakistan, 2,500 people have been infected and 71 died in the past 24 hours, with the death toll approaching 9,100. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 1.64 million lives and infected over 74 million people. A Sikh leader has committed suicide at one of the farmers' protest sites in Indian capital New Delhi. Police say in his suicide note, Baba Ram Singh wrote he was hurt to see the condition of the protesting farmers. Opposition parties said the farmers' death is the result of Modi's government's cruelty towards them. Tens of thousands of farmers have been protesting for the last 22 days against the controversial laws they say favor big corporates.
You can show me clear from this accident on
In the United States, at least 2 people have died as a powerful and complex winter storm is moving through the mid-Atlantic and northeast. Several injured in a multi-vehicle pileup in central Pennsylvania, while police in Virginia and Maryland responded to hundreds of crashes. About 36,000 homes and businesses were without power across Virginia. China's Chang'e 5 mission has returned from Moon with rocks and soil. A capsule carrying the materials landed at the designated site in Xizhiwang Banner of Inner Mongolia. China has become the 3rd country to bring moon rocks back to Earth 40 years after the US and Soviet missions. And in football, Liverpool have beaten Tottenham Hotspur 2-1 in their English Premier League encounter. Roberto Firmino's last-minute header broke Tottenham's stubborn resistance and sent the Reds to the top of the league table. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. The United States has set new daily records by reporting more than 3,700 COVID-19 deaths and 250,000 infections. Overall, there are 307,000 deaths and almost 17 million cases in the country, while Brazil has surpassed 7 million infections with 70,000 more cases and 1,000 new deaths in a day. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.6 million lives and infected 74 million people. More on coronavirus in this report.
As announcements of coronavirus vaccine rollouts pour in, many nations face an unprecedented surge, dampening consumer optimism. Along with record single-day deaths and cases, the number of people in U.S. hospitals was at a high for the 11th day in a row. President-elect Joe Biden will get the vaccine as soon as next week, and Vice President Mike Pence will get it on Friday. With Brazil and Colombia reporting the highest number of cases, the Inter-American Development Bank has offered an additional $1 billion for Latin America and the Caribbean to acquire vaccines.
We have provided and reprogrammed $1 billion to ensure that we will immediately address the region's need for vaccines. We have already worked and asked 26 borrowing countries what their needs are, and there are 6 in particular if they need help with the acquisition of the vaccine and all the infrastructure for distribution, storage, etc.
Over in Europe, despite the curfews and lockdowns, record high deaths and new infections are once again ravaging Turkey. Germany and France say they will roll out the Pfizer vaccine in the last week of December if it is approved by the EU. The number of infections in the Netherlands jumped by more than 11,000 in 24 hours, hitting a new record. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it will be inhumane to ban Christmas and defended the government's decision to ease curbs over the holidays. Meanwhile, New Zealand has announced it will offer free vaccine to all citizens by the middle of the next year.
Today it gives me great pleasure to announce that we've signed 2 further advance purchase agreements for COVID-19 vaccines that will ensure we have enough vaccines to cover the entire population of New Zealand and the Pacific, should they want them.
Australia is scrambling to trace the source of new COVID-19 cases after a cluster was detected in Sydney. Meanwhile, the WHO says China will welcome an international team of investigators in Wuhan, the known epicenter of the virus, in January. South Korea reported a record 22 deaths in a single day as the country's largest wave of infection strains hospitals.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 71 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 9,080. The Ministry of Health says 2,545 new infections were detected overnight. There currently are more than 42,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. Out of over 448,000 countrywide cases, more than 396,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 199,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab province has reported nearly 129,000 cases so far. Now, a Sikh leader has committed suicide at one of the farmers' protest sites in Indian capital New Delhi. Police say in his suicide note, Baba Ram Singh wrote he was hurt to see the condition of the protesting farmers. Opposition parties said the farmers' death is the result of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government's cruelty towards them. Opposition leader Rahul Gandhi said Modi's administration should immediately repeal the laws. The reforms contained in 3 laws loosen rules around the sale, pricing and storage of farm produce, while farmers say that new rules threaten their livelihood. Several rounds of talks between farm union leaders and the government have failed. Tens of thousands of farmers have been protesting for the last 22 days against the controversial law they say favour big corporates. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the warring sides in Afghanistan should take steps to reduce violence leading to a ceasefire. He was speaking to Afghan President Ashraf Ghani over the phone. Khan said Pakistan will continue to facilitate efforts for an Afghan-led political settlement. He welcomed recent developments in the peace process and termed the ongoing visit of a Taliban delegation to Pakistan an important step. Led by Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, the delegation met Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in Islamabad. Speaking after the meeting, Qureshi said the next round of peace talks will be held on the 5th of January, for which the venue is yet to be decided. He added that the Taliban are fully inclined towards peace and all-out efforts are required from all sides to end the conflict. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says the armed forces are fully prepared to vanquish all threats. He said this during his visit to a field exercise area in Gujranwala with Chief of Air Staff Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan. They witnessed an ongoing exercise where the use of air defense weapon systems and airspace management was practiced. General Bajwa expressed satisfaction over the operational readiness of the armed forces. He called for greater cooperation and synchronization to tackle complex battlefield challenges. According to the military's media wing, the exercise was aimed at achieving optimum synergy amongst air defense elements. Now, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has arrived in United Arab Emirates on a 2-day trip. The Foreign Office said he will hold discussions with the Emirati leadership on regional and global issues. It said the Foreign Minister will also exchange views on bilateral cooperation, trade and the welfare of Pakistani diaspora. Qureshi will meet the Pakistani community and interact with the media. The UAE is home to the second largest Pakistani community abroad. The two countries enjoy historic friendly relations rooted in shared history, common faith and values. Now, moving on, the United States has added India and Thailand to a watch list of countries devaluing their currencies against the dollar. The Treasury Department also labeled Switzerland and Vietnam as currency manipulators. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the U.S. has taken a strong step to protect economic growth. A Treasury official said U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's transition team has not been briefed about it. In response to the allegations, the Swiss National Bank denied manipulating its currency. Now, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has renewed his promise to avenge the U.S. assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Speaking at an event marking Soleimani's first death anniversary, Khamenei warned Tehran against trusting Washington. Khamenei said Tehran should focus on neutralizing the impact of U.S. sanctions rather than lifting them as it has failed. He repeated the call for ousting U.S. from the Middle East as Washington's hostilities would not end. Now, this comes after the Iranian president said the door was open for negotiations with the new U.S. administration. Meanwhile, the United States has imposed fresh Iran-related sanctions on companies based in China and the United Arab Emirates. The Treasury Department says 4 entities facilitated the export of Iranian petrochemical products. It says the curbs also target Vietnam gas and chemicals transportation cooperation over its connection to Iranian petroleum products. The sanctions mark the latest step in U.S. President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. The Trump administration has imposed sanctions nearly daily over the past several weeks, many targeted at Iran. Moving on to Nigeria, where the authorities have entered into negotiations with the kidnappers for the release of school children kidnapped in the Katsina state. Governor Aminu Bello Masari said the state is using the local security outfit Makaba to ensure the release of the students. He said over 400 students are still missing after the attack on the school, contrary to the previous claims of around 300 missing students. The governor said the negotiations for the students' release will not include paying ransom money to the kidnappers. He added the government is regularly updating the parents on the kidnapped schoolboys' whereabouts. Earlier, the Nigerian security forces managed to rescue 17 students in an operation, but 2 students were killed during the operation. Now, Iraq's federal police have destroyed 4 shelters belonging to the ISIS terrorist group in a rural area of Kirkuk city. The operations commander said large amounts of weapons and ammunition have been seized. He said the operation in the area is still continuing. Iraq's counter-terrorism service has recently launched a multi-pronged anti-ISIS operation in the country backed by U.S. coalition forces. More news coming up in this bulletin, but after a short break, stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Armenia, the opposition has called for a national strike on Tuesday to press for Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's resignation. They want him to resign over what they say was his disastrous handling of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Pashinyan has accepted responsibility for the conflict's outcome, but refused to resign. He ignored a deadline set by his critics to step down earlier this month. Last week, hundreds of opposition demonstrators rallied in Yerevan and chanted for his exit. They have called for snap elections and also put forward a possible interim leader to replace Pashinyan. Pashinyan said in an interview that it was not up to him to call a snap election, and such a move would have to be agreed with other parliamentary parties. Meanwhile, Belarus opposition leader Sviatlana Tishkonashkaya has urged the European Union to step up its support for the pro-democracy movement in her country. She made the comments after picking up the EU's top human rights prize on behalf of a group of opposition leaders. Tishkonashkaya said, "Without a free Belarus, Europe is not fully free either." The award was given in support of protests against the results of an August presidential election that the West say was rigged. Tens of thousands of people have taken part in demonstrations since the disputed election. Now, a French court has convicted 14 people in the 2015 Charlie Hebdo attacks. The court found the individuals guilty on various charges ranging from belonging to a criminal network to direct complicity in the attacks. The court announced 30 years jail term for Hayat Boumediene and Ali Riza, who were judged to be the main culprits. It also dropped terrorist charges for 6 of the 11 defendants who were found guilty of lesser crimes. The January 2015 attacks on Charlie Hebdo magazine left 17 people dead. Total 11 defendants appeared in the court for the verdict, and the remaining 3 were tried in absentia. The U.S. state of Texas, along with 9 other states, is suing Google for violating the antitrust law. The Texas lawsuit accuses the tech giant of illegally preserving its monopoly over the online advertising market. It criticizes Google's move to strike a deal with Facebook to manipulate online advertising auctions. In a separate antitrust lawsuit, online publishers claim they lost revenue because of Google's dominance in online ads. They demand Google divest parts of its ads business. With the latest legal complaint, Google is expected to face third antitrust lawsuit from over 30 attorney generals. Now, under pressure from the regulators globally, the tech giant has rejected the claims, calling the lawsuit meritless. Now, in Bolivia, scientists have announced the discovery of 20 new species in the Bolivian Andes, as well as sightings of plants and animals not seen for decades. Details in this report.
Located near the Bolivian capital of La Paz, Zongo Valley is known as the heart of the region. High up steep, rugged mountains are an array of well-preserved habitats which are thriving with lush biodiversity. It was among the cloud forest that researchers discovered 20 species new to science, including a frog that may be the smallest in the Andes, a new venomous pit viper, 4 butterflies, and 4 orchid species.
So the findings of our RAP expedition to the Zongo Valley in Bolivia were really extraordinary. We were quite surprised at the number of species that we found that were new to science, as well as the rediscovered species. And these findings are of enormous importance to Bolivia and to the world.
They also found plants and animals not seen for decades, including the devil-eyed frog that was last seen 20 years ago. Also rediscovered was the Alizata verticillata, a small flowering tree, after 127 years.
As scientists trained in this and with experience doing these types of expeditions, especially when we visit places like this in the Andes, we expect to find a certain number of new species, perhaps not as many vertebrates like the snakes and frog that we found that were new. But even more exciting for many of us was the rediscovery of 4 species that were believed to be extinct.
The expedition was led by a non-profit environmental group and the government of the capital city of La Paz. It included 17 scientists who went to the Chavi Grande, a locality near La Paz.
Now, a study has revealed that kangaroos are able to intentionally communicate with humans and ask for help. This report has more.
As if there wasn't already enough about kangaroos that fascinates, researchers have now revealed that the Aussie signature animal can communicate with humans. This research challenges the notion that only domesticated animals use their gaze to convey meaning.
Much to our surprise, they did show the gazing behavior and the gaze alternations that are usually associated with domestic animals. So it shows that this effect of trying to deliberately communicate with a human is not really restricted to the usual domestic species that we know. And it was fantastic to find that this actually occurs in kangaroos.
The study involved 11 kangaroos that lived in captivity but had not been tamed. 10 of them used their gaze to point at objects, while 9 gazed alternatively between humans and objects as if asking for help.
Well, now, not all old things are out of date. For in Ukraine, a baker is carrying on a century-old style of decorating Christmas cookies. More in this report.
Would you eat this masterful cookie? Oksana Doroshenko is one of a few people who still practice a rare art native to her home village in Ukraine's central Poltava region. She decorates Christmas cookies inspired by Ukrainian folk art. Oksana's mother-in-law, Hannah Doroshenko, was a master baker and passed on the craft to her daughter-in-law.
It is our historic and cultural legacy, and I don't want this folk art to vanish and fade away in the crazy rhythm of modern life. I don't want it to die with our grannies. I want young people to practice this tradition and pass it on from generation to generation. I want young women to bake these traditional cookies for New Year and Christmas. Bake these cookies in the shape of horses and teach their children how to bake.
Traditionally, these cookies came in the shape of girls, horses, and roosters painted exclusively in pink and decorated with blue, white, yellow, sometimes green. Before store-bought baked goods became popular, they were shared as special gifts on special occasions.
Well, now in the United States, at least 2 people have died as a powerful and complex winter storm is moving through the mid-Atlantic and northeast. Several injured in a multi-vehicle pileup in central Pennsylvania. Police in Virginia and Maryland responded to hundreds of crashes, while residents in New York, Boston and Philadelphia were asked to avoid travel as the storm moved in. About 36,000 homes and businesses were without power across Virginia. The storm is expected to bring heavy snow, strong winds and possible coastal flooding into Thursday. The National Weather Service says winds could gust as high as 50 meters per hour in some areas. Now in business stories, Pakistan and the Netherlands have agreed to further enhance investment and trade relations. Foreign Minister Shamim Qureshi reached the understanding with his Dutch counterpart Stef Blok on a call. Qureshi said the ratio of exports between the 2 countries has increased despite the coronavirus. He said there is a need to expand the scope of cooperation in various fields. The Foreign Minister also briefed Blok about the recent EU Disinfo Lab report. Qureshi said India is involved in a campaign to malign Pakistan through fake websites and NGOs. Now, Britain's retailers and food manufacturers have called on lawmakers to urgently investigate ongoing disruption at the country's ports. The retailers said the delays are hurting their plans to build stocks ahead of Christmas and end of the Brexit transition period. The British Retail Consortium said they have requested the Chair of Parliament's Commons Transport Select Committee to urgently inquire. It said the coronavirus pandemic on global shipping schedules has created significant disruption at many of the UK's key ports. Meanwhile, the Bank of England says it is also expecting to refrain from more stimulus as it waits to see for a possible no-Brexit deal. While warning of challenging times ahead, the U.S. Federal Reserve has promised to funnel cash into financial markets in future to fight the recession. The central bank said the prospects of U.S. economy brightened despite a surge in COVID-19 cases. In a news conference, the Federal Reserve Chair said he expects a growth of 4.2% next year, with the unemployment rate slipping to 5%. Jeremy Powell said the bank's program of monthly bond purchases for keeping the interest rate near zero will stay until complete economic recovery. He said the measures will ensure monetary policy's continuous support to the economy.
Today, my colleagues on the FOMC and I reaffirmed our strong forward guidance for interest rates and also provided additional guidance for our asset purchases. Together, these measures will ensure that monetary policy will continue to deliver powerful support to the economy until the recovery is complete.
Meanwhile, shares in Asia Pacific are trading mostly higher as investors react to the latest announcements from the United States Federal Reserve. Australia's ASX 200 is leading the gains, adding over 1%. Mainland Chinese shares are trading almost 1% higher, with both the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component gaining. Japan's Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index have risen fractionally. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has also gained marginally, but Seoul's Kospi bucked the trend, sliding under the flat line. Now, Liverpool have beaten Tottenham Hotspur 2-1 in their Football English Premier League encounter. Roberto Firmino's last-minute header broke Tottenham's stubborn resistance at Anfield. The win moves the Reds to the top of the English League table with 28 points. In another match, Everton defeated Leicester City 2-1 to move to 5th place with 23 points. Richarlison and Mason Holgate scored one each for Everton. Meanwhile, Leeds United struck 3 times in the last 11 minutes to trash Newcastle United 5-2. Late goals from Stuart Dallas, John Alioski and Jack Harrison sealed Leeds' win, moving them to the 13th spot. In another league match, Arsenal and Southampton drew 1-1. Now, in a German Bundesliga clash, Bayern Munich beat Wolfsburg 2-1. Robert Lewandowski scored twice to steer the champions to a comeback win, keeping them a point behind leaders Bayern Leverkusen. Bayern fell behind for the 6th consecutive league game when the Maximilian Philipp volleyed home in the 5th minute. But Lewandowski struck either side of the break to give his side their first win in the last 3 games. The Poland striker levelled in first-half stoppage time for his 250th league goal. Lewandowski has become only the 3rd player after Gerd Müller and Klaus Fischer to reach that mark in Bundesliga. It was the first loss of the season for Wolfsburg, who had chances to score only to be denied by 2 outstanding Manuel Neuer saves. Meanwhile, Juventus have drawn with Atalanta 1-1 in their Serie A clash. Federico Chiesa put the champions ahead with a fine strike from outside the box, his first goal of the season. Remo Freuler equalised for mid-table Atlanta with a fine 25-yard strike off the underside of the bar. Cristiano Ronaldo had a chance to win the game after Chiesa was fouled, but Pierluigi Gallini guessed right to save his kick. 9-time champs Juve are unbeaten after 12 league games under Andrea Pirlo, although half of them have been drawn. They are 3rd in the table, 4 points behind leaders AC Milan. Now in cricket, Jaffna Stallions beat Gale Gladiators by 53 runs in the final of the Lanka Premier League at Hambantota. Pakistani all-rounder Shoaib Malik was declared man of the match for his brilliant performance. Jaffna Stallions set a 189-run target after electing to bat first. Malik made a hard-hitting 46, while Stallions captain Thisara Pereira scored 39 crucial runs. Gale Gladiators were never really in the chase after a start that saw them losing first 3 wickets for just 16 runs. Their skipper Bhanuka Rajapaksa knock of 40 runs went in vain as they could only manage 139 runs for the loss of 9 wickets. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the world. And that is all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.